Okay, welcome back, and this is Chapter 4. Chapter 4 is all about software. Remember the last chapter was all about hardware. So this is programs and apps using software at work, school, and home. Okay, as always, we're going to start by reading the chapter objectives to make sure that we cover everything. So on page 152 in the book, they talk about identify the general categories of programs and apps. Yeah, that'd be handy. Describe how an operating system interacts with applications and hardware. Yeah, you need to know that. Differentiate among the ways you can acquire programs and apps. Yep. Identify key features of productivity application. Yeah, we'll go through some of that. Identify the key features of graphics and multimedia applications. Okay. Identify the uses of personal interest applications. Identify the purpose of a software used in communication. Identify the key features of security tools. And identify the key features of file and disk management tools. Okay, so let's get cranking. Alright, let's start off with some kind of weird definitions, but they're not bad. So, page 152. A program or software consists of a series of related instructions, and then they turn around and say an application or an app is sometimes called application software, consists of programs designed. I'm thinking, no, wait a minute, hold on. So, a program, an application, and an app, those three terms are really saying the same thing. It is an application that you run on your machine that does something. Now, the term app has kind of been taken over by the mobile market. You know, when the iPhone came out, you could download an app. There's an app for that. And so, in that context, app meant a relatively small application. Doesn't have to be, but when people say app, they typically mean low cost, like I paid $1 for it, or it only does one thing, purpose-built software that does one tiny little thing, and that's it. Now, again, those are distinctions that, the media tends to make, but in reality, a program, an application, and an app, they're all the same thing. They're all written by developers, they're all sent out, and they all run on your device. Okay, cool. On page 153, they go through these categories one more time. So they kind of break it up into, work-related, business kind of things like word processing and presentation and spreadsheets, and we're going to go through all of those. And then graphics and multimedia, things like I want to do some computer-aided drafting or design, which is kind of cool. I want to do desktop publishing. That'd be kind of cool. I want to do, web publishing. I want to do photo apps. I want to do photo editing. Those are kind of things. Personal interest. There's an awful lot of lifestyle-related apps. Medical and entertainment. Obviously, lots and lots of entertainment kind of stuff. Education. Woohoo! Communication. There's all sorts of things. The blogging and chat rooms and emails and all those kinds of things. Security, and we're going to go through some of this, but we have an entire chapter coming up next, going through an awful lot of the security. But we'll hit the highlights about your machine probably has a firewall, a software firewall. It probably has antivirus. It probably has all these kinds of things. At least I would hope it has those kinds of things. File and disk management. We'll touch on a couple of those. Basically, extra utilities on your machine that kind of make life easier when you're trying to deal with a bunch of files. Okay, so on page 154, they talk about, briefly, the roles of the operating system. Now, the classical definition of an operating system is the stuff that runs in the background that provides like a traffic cop. I have one printer, and I have one display, and I have one keyboard, and who's going to control of all? I've got a gazillion things running on my computer, but who's going to control which one has access? So it's sort of like a traffic cop. He's also a resource manager because I have two applications saying, wait, I need more RAM. I need more memory. And again, the resource manager says, wait a minute now, you're a little bit more important than this one, so I'm going to give more disk space or more memory or more processing power. So it doles out these precious resources. It's also the one that does the file system. So, for example, I'm running an application that has to open a file. Well, you tell the operating system, please open this file for me, and it takes care of it all. So file and disk management, resources, such as memory and those kinds of things. And then, of course, the traffic cop with devices. Can't everybody talk to the printer at the same time? Otherwise, the top half will be my document, and the bottom half will be my coworker's document, right? Got to make sense. So that is what an operating system does. And that's not what we're talking about in this chapter. So I went through that entire long, drawn-out explanation only to tell you that that's not what we're talking about. So what we are talking about is the kind of software that you install on your machine yourself. Typically, when you buy a computer these days, it comes with the operating system installed, and so you don't have to do anything with that. Okay, on page 155, they talk about the different ways you can acquire software. And let's go through this because, believe it or not, there's some cool stuff in here you need to kind of be aware of. And there's some spooky stuff in here that people tend to misrepresent. Clearly, the easiest and most traditional way is retail. I mean, I go down to a box store, and I go to the shelf, and I pick out the piece of software, and I take it to the register, and they scan it, and I go on about my business. I come home, and I pop a disc in, and I'm done. Cool. That's becoming less and less prevalent these days because things like the iPhone and downloading apps has become such a normal thing and such a money-making opportunity for developers that an awful lot of companies who never had that feature before are now getting into that online purchasing. So that's one way that you can acquire software. The other one, of course, is custom. I've got a custom piece of software that developers in my own company have built for me, or I've hired out. So I've hired Kumquat Industries to come in and write me a piece of software for my line of business, and it's only mine and no one else gets to use it, and it's very, very specialized in doing whatever the heck it is I do for a living. So that typically is expensive, as you can imagine, because either I'm hiring my own developers and paying them, or I'm hiring a third party to write some software for me, and that ain't cheap. The bill rate for a good application programming person, not the lower tier but the higher tier, the bill rate is like $70, $80 an hour, sometimes up to $100 an hour. This is expensive stuff. Okay, a web application. So perhaps I don't want to go around to 400 computers in my office and install a piece of software. Instead, I'll write the software and install it on our web server. So I install it one time, and then I send out an email to everyone saying, hey, the new application is out. Go to this, click on this link to launch the new application. Cool. Now, typically they perform roughly the same thing. The web application may not be quite so rich of an interface, but the fact that I can install it one time and be done, and whenever I want to do an update to it, I can update it one time and everyone instantly gets the new version. Now, if I installed it on all the PCs and I go, oh man, I found a bug, I need to update, so I send out an update, but Bob's out on a business trip and he's got his laptop with him, and he's not going to get the new version. Okay, so web applications. Mobile applications, and again, mobile applications has kind of been overrun by marketing. But mobile application is something that I typically buy off the internet, but it doesn't have to be that way, that installs on my device. And this could be any type of application, but they're typically small. And the reason why they're typically small is because the device is typically small. I'm not going to do, computer-aided drafting. I'm not going to do an AutoCAD application on my iPad. That's just the wrong platform for that. So relatively small apps, again, apps. And then there's mobile web applications. It's the same kind of scenario, except that it's a web page now that's specifically designed and tailored and morphed to fit a small screen. So the text might be a little bit larger and the buttons might be a little easier to hit, with your fingertip, rather than, somebody sitting on a 1024 by 768 monitor. Okay, so mobile applications. And the mobile web application doesn't necessarily mean you have a separate web page. You could have a single web application that serves both big screens and small screens. Kind of cool. So you can have one web app that looks at the device and goes, that's a small device. Let me switch over to this interface to make it a little easier for them to run. And then they have open source. Now, this is where people get a little confused. There's an awful lot of software companies out there which are going to try to convince you that using free and open source software is a bad thing. Why? Because it's in their special interest. It's in their interest to not have you migrate to something that doesn't cost anything. You know, they're in the business of selling you software, so of course they're going to think that it's a bad idea. But there's a movement out there, and it's called FOSS, F-O-S-S, free and open source software, that a lot of companies are saying, you know, I've heard all the rhetoric, but let's just try it, see what happens. And they're stunned at when they go free and open source of how well it works in some areas and how poorly it works in others. But anyway, it's one of those things where you can't always trust the hype. So free and open source software. And then there's kind of categories of that. And so of the free and open source, there is shareware. Now shareware is got a dirty word, got a dirty name. What that basically means is I give you like a preview. Maybe it'll run for 30 days, or maybe it'll only work for 5 times, or some sort of a preview of what my app will do. And then after that period of time, you have to pay money for it. And because this is directly from an author to the consumer, right? There's no big company in between, right? This is, you know, Joe Blow making money directly off of me, the customer. And since there's nobody else in between, this makes corporate America go ape shit, because they think this guy might be a spy, or he might be putting in malware, and there's no way I can sue him because he's just an individual. There's no company. And so they go nuts over shareware. And rather than just saying, look, we're paranoid and we don't like you to use shareware, they come up with all sorts of crazy rules like, you know, shareware is the major source for viruses. And I'm going, no, it's not. But, you know, they have to come up with some sort of excuse to tell the people that, you know, we can't use shareware. Okay. So, yes, shareware may or may not be terrible. So having an outright prohibition against shareware is actually not very smart. You probably need to spend a little bit more time and energy on your policies to make sure you're actually getting what you want. Freeware. Freeware, again, people have all these crazy things. It's like, wait a minute, if he's not charging any money for this, then he must be doing something dastardly. He must be sneaking there and making money some other way. Well, maybe he's just a hobbyist. Maybe this is a software guy who doesn't care. He's got a full-time job someplace else, and he's having fun writing programs on the weekends, and he just don't care about making any money. So he sends things out freeware. So once again, you could look at it paranoid and going, oh my goodness, we're not going to allow any freeware because blah, 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 blah. Or you could actually have a policy that makes sense to evaluate the software to see if there actually is a threat. And then last one is the public domain. Now, public domain means I'm writing a piece of software and I'm releasing it with no license whatsoever. Meaning that you could take my software and use it and turn right around and sell it. You can make money off of it and not owe me a dime. Okay, now the other categories, you know, the shareware and the freeware stuff, typically there is a license behind it. Now, it could be a free license, but a license is never the same. You know, license doesn't mean pay money. License means I'm restricted on what I can and cannot do. Okay? So it has nothing to do with money. Public domain is the exact opposite of that. Public domain means I don't have any restrictions whatsoever. You can do anything you want to with it, to include making money, and you don't owe me a dime. Okay. In the margin notes on page 155, they have this little thing called, I don't know, by the way, and they talk about copyright and, you know, what the term copyright means, and it talks about, you know, it gives the author, you know, exclusive use and the rights to reproduce things. And so software by itself is automatically copyrighted, just like a lot of other things. So I have to declare, I could declare what terms that the copyright might actually be. Okay, this is a good place to stop for the 15-minute mark. We'll pick this thing up again in just a few.